In the 21st century, wars between nation states are exceedingly rare. So the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February and the following war, far from settled at the end of the year, is the clear #1 global news event of 2022. Following tensions and threats from the Russian side in the months leading up to the invasion, and numerous what would turn out fruitless attempts by the EU, the US and others to de-escalate the situation, on the 24th of February, Russian forces crossed the Ukrainian border. Forces entered from Russian as well as Belarusian territory, and was supported by extensive airstrikes on all large Ukrainian cities. All Ukrainian citizens were granted the right to enter and stay in the European Union. And neighboring Poland, Romania and others saw large refugee flows during the spring. Over 8 million Ukrainians had fled abroad by the end of the year. Russian troops made good progress in the early stages of the invasion, but it soon became clear that they met strong opposition from civilians and were stalled in their progress. NATO increased its presence in its Eastern European member states throughout the year. With military support from the EU, the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, Turkey and many more, and humanitarian aid from even more nations, the Ukrainian resistance started turning the conflict around in the fall of 2022 and taking back territory lost to Russian forces. It remains unclear whether Ukrainian forces will attempt to take back control over the Crimean Peninsula as well as the Luhansk and Donetsk regions that has been under Russian control since 2014. The two latter were after a referendum declared independent states by Russia, without any international recognition. The war brought back old fears of nuclear war, with Russian President Vladimir Putin both subtly and directly implying the potential use of them in Ukraine. Fighting around several of Ukraine's nuclear power plants also caused worries. Following successes from the Ukrainian forces in the fall of 2022, Russian missile strikes has intensified and hit hard against the Ukrainian infrastructure, including electricity and water supply, causing suffering with falling temperatures in the winter months at the end of the year. The war has had numerous consequences throughout the world. In Russia, protests against the war were met with violence and mass arrests, and media has been even more tightly controlled than before. To a large extent, the invasion marked a complete stop for free media in Russia. The invasion has been met with condemnation from most nations, and heavy sanctions have been put in place on Russia and Belarus. The sanctions have impacted the Russian economy, but also hit hard back at the nations dependent on Russian fossil fuels. The world saw high inflation, mainly driven by high fuel and electricity prices during the second half of 2022. An economic downturn that is mainly caused by the war and sanctions, but also by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. In September, explosions damaged the Nord Stream natural gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea. The source of the sabotage is still undetermined. Ukraine applied for membership in the EU and NATO following the invasion. Sweden and Finland applied for membership in NATO following a shift in the public opinion, and has been accepted by all member states but Hungary and Turkey at the end of 2022. The war also brought on a global food crisis when the large crop exporter of Ukraine either could not produce due to the war or could not export due to Russian control of its ports. Agreements between Russia and Ukraine have partly lessened the impact from this throughout the year. Ukraine won the Eurovision Song Contest in May with the song Stefania by the Kalush Orchestra. Next year's edition will be held in the United Kingdom due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russia was excluded from the competition. Elon Musk did, after some disruption, go through with buying the social media Twitter for $44 billion in October, and the following months has been a roller coaster for the platform. Many noted musicians and actors passed away during 2022, including Bahamian actor and first black to win an Academy Award for Best Actor, Sidney Poitier. American singer and actress from the 1978 musical film Grease, Olivia Newton-John. Greek composer winning an Academy Award for his score to the movie Chariots of Fire in 1981, Vangelis. American country music singer Loretta Lynn, American singer Jerry Lee Lewis, and Indian singer named the Queen of Melody, Lata Mangeshkar. Mangeshkar died in February of 2022 at the age of 92, after 8 decades in the Indian music and movie industries. Taylor Swift broke with her album Midnights several Spotify records, including the most streamed album in a single day, momentarily bringing the streaming service down. The Nobel Prize for Literature was awarded to French writer Annie Ernaux. And Sri Lankan author Shehan Karunatilaka won the Booker Prize for his novel The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. Japanese-produced Elden Ring won Game of the Year at the Game Awards in December. In Cannes, satirical comedy Triangle of Sadness won the Palme d'Or in May. And the historical drama Sardar Udham won the Filmfare Award for Best Film in Mumbai. In Lagos, Tanzanian movie Tug of War wins Best Film at the Africa Movie Academy Awards. And comedy drama Coda won Best Picture at the Academy Awards in Los Angeles, even though that last win was slightly shadowed by an infamous slap earlier in the night. Following a visit from the United States House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, tension peaked regarding the sovereign territory. China conducted major military drills around the island for several days after the visit. In Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping was elected for a third term in October as the head of the Chinese Communist Party. The 2-term limit was abolished in 2018, consolidating the power of Jinping further. Following the clashes in 2021, new fighting erupted on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan in September. A few hundred fatalities have been reported, and the EU deployed a monitoring mission to the Armenian side in October. Very similarly and almost exactly at the same time, clashes broke out on the Tajikistan-Kyrgyzstan border. A few hundred casualties were reported here as well, and a ceasefire was established after a week. Negotiations between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front resulted in a peace agreement signed in November, after 2 years of fighting in the region. The war is believed to have cost between 400,000 and 600,000 lives. While promising, smaller clashes have continued, and areas have yet to receive much-needed aid deliveries. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was shot at a campaign event in July in the city of Nara. Despite fast medical attention, he was confirmed dead a few hours later. Author of the so-called Satanic Verses, Salman Rushdie, was attacked in New York in August. Being a target of Islamic extremists for decades, Rushdie suffered serious injuries but survived. The month of October saw a series of tragical deadly events around the world. 135 people were killed following a riot during a football game in eastern Java, Indonesia. In Seoul, South Korea, over 150 people died in tight crowds during Halloween celebrations. Attacks targeting the education ministry in Mogadishu, Somalia, killed over 100 people. An and a collapsed pedestrian bridge in Gujarat, India, left 130 people dead. Heavy protests throughout Iran started in September following the death of Mahsa Amini, arrested for improperly wearing her hijab. Several hundred people have been killed following the violent response from the regime forces against the protesters, demanding increased rights for women and the overturn of the Islamic Republic. Whether any reforms will follow remains to be seen. While fewer and fewer nations keep COVID-19 prevention measures in place, China saw protests erupt in response to its strong lockdown enforcements in November. A change in tone from the Chinese government was followed by a series of relaxed restrictions, including for entering and traveling abroad. The world saw several gains for LGBTQ rights in 2022. In Chile, Cuba, Switzerland, Slovenia, and several Mexican states, same-sex marriage became legal. Latvia legalized civil unions for same-sex couples. Singapore, Kuwait, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Antigua and Barbuda took steps to decriminalize and legalize different same-sex and transgender acts. Noted politicians Madeleine Albright, former US Secretary of State, and Mikhail Gorbachev, last leader of the Soviet Union, passed away during 2022. The 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realm came to an end when she passed away in September. She was succeeded by now King Charles III. Beijing hosted the Winter Olympics and Paralympics as the first city in history to host both Summer and Winter Olympic Games. Just as in Tokyo in 2021, no spectators were allowed on the events due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Norway came out on top of the Olympic medal table with 37 medals, ahead of Germany and the host nation of China. China won the Paralympic medal table ahead of Ukraine and Canada. Russia and Belarus were expelled from most international sporting events in 2022, following the invasion of Ukraine in February. For the first time, Tour de France was held for both men and women, with Annemiek van Vleuten of the Netherlands and Jonas Vingegaard of Denmark standing victorious. In football, South Africa won the Women's Africa Cup of Nations held in Morocco, and Senegal won the men's tournament held in Cameroon. England won the Women's European Championship on home turf in July. The Men's World Cup in Qatar in November and December was questioned for corruption and human rights violations. Argentina, with Lionel Messi as their most prominent player, won the title after a tight final against France. In the 2022 Wimbledon Championship, Serbia's Novak Djokovic and Elena Rybakina of Kazakhstan won their respective finals. The Los Angeles Rams won their second Super Bowl title ever, beating the Cincinnati Bengals. The United States held the World Championship in athletics for the first time and won the medal table with 13 gold medals. Jamaican sprinter Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce won her 5th gold in the women's 100 meters. And American Allyson Felix ran her last championship after winning her 20th World Championship medal in the 2022 competitions. Other athletes that ended their careers in 2022 include 4-time WNBA champion Sue Bird, and tennis legends of 20-time Grand Slam winner Roger Federer of Switzerland and 23-time Grand Slam winner Serena Williams of the US, the latter the most by any player in modern times.
Good afternoon. I have just accepted Her Majesty the Queen's kind invitation to form a new government.
The UK saw a fair bit of political turbulence during the fall, when Liz Truss was elected Prime Minister, only to resign less than 2 months later. New Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was elected by the end of October. Burkina Faso saw 2 military coups in 2022. President Kaboré was detained after a military storming of the presidential residence in Ouagadougou in January. But the appointed Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba was ousted himself in another coup in September and replaced by Ibrahim Traoré. Burkina Faso is currently suspended from the African Union. In Turkmenistan, the apple certainly fell straight down when the president of the last 15 years, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, stepped aside. His son, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, won the March election with 73% of the vote. Since independence in 1991, no election in the Central Asian state has been deemed fair and free. Protests in Sri Lanka during the spring and summer of 2022 has led to multiple politicians resigning and being reinstated in different positions. Former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was elected as president in July, and Dinesh Gunawardena as the new Prime Minister. The protests were fueled by economic struggles and rising fuel and energy prices, after a sharp rise in the foreign debt during the last couple of years. The May election in the Philippines marked the end of the 6-year presidency of Rodrigo Duterte, with Bongbong Marcos elected president on a federalist platform. Sara Duterte, daughter of the former president, was elected vice president. New President Bongbong is son to Ferdinand Marcos, the dictator of the Philippines from 1965 to 1986. William Ruto came out victorious from the Kenyan presidential election in August. The tight election result caused losing candidate Raila Odinga to question its validity and challenge it to the Supreme Court. A challenge that was later rejected in court.
Dunque, buongiorno a tutti. La delegazione composta dai capigruppo e dai presidenti di tutte.
In the Italian election in September, Giorgia Meloni was elected the first female Prime Minister of Italy. Representing the far-right nationalist party of Brothers of Italy, she will lead a coalition government with Forza Italia and the Lega party. The presidential elections in Brazil in October led to a second round in which Lula da Silva of the Workers' Party came out victorious with 50.9% of the votes. Right-wing incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro was hence not successful in his bid for a second term in office, which sparked protests around the country. Bolsonaro did not initially recognize the result, but the transition of power began formally a few days after the election. David Bennett became the first human to have a heart transplanted from a pig in January. The Maryland surgery is believed to be a great step towards a functioning, non-human source of organs, even though Bennett's health eventually deteriorated and he passed away in March. In a UK-based laboratory, researchers doubled the previous record of energy output from a nuclear fusion experiment. The record output, while still low, is seen as a stepping stone towards a potential future commercial use of fusion energy. US scientists declared additional advances by the end of the year. New reports from the UN Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, painted a bleak future if global emissions are not reduced drastically within the coming decades. The reports called for more investments in renewable energy and a general step away from fossil fuels. The UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt in November did not see any major breakthroughs. Many areas saw dramatic heat waves during 2022, including Europe that saw temperatures reach well into the 40s, peaking at 47 degrees, 116 degrees Fahrenheit, in Portugal in July. The death toll might have exceeded 50,000 over several nations and months. A heatwave in southern Asia was followed by heavy monsoon rains hitting Pakistan the hardest. The death toll reached 1,700 and millions of people were left homeless. climate protests throughout the world gained attention in 2022, not the least when famous art galleries were the victims. The James Webb Space Telescope delivered the sharpest images of the distant universe to this day, after being launched last year. The images were unveiled by the White House in July. In November, the global population passed 8 billion, despite the growth rate being its lowest in many decades. Thank you for watching this far from complete summary of 2022. You can find my yearly summaries for 2020 and 2021 in the description below. I hope you want to see more content from me in 2023. Consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on that.